I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, welcome. It is time to continue talking about anime series from various time periods and using them in your BESM game. This week I've again moved away from the 2016 series, and I'm going to be talking a couple more classic series from the 90s, and I'm also going to include two more from summer 2015 because that's where I was working at previously before. So my two classic ones I want to talk about Ranma 1/2 and Flame of Recca. And the 2015 ones, I'm going to talk about Ushio and Tora. And I'm also going to introduce a movie, which is going to be an anime series, Little Witch Academia. So that's a little different one that I'm starting on the movie rather than the actual anime series, the television version of it. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's move on to the two classics with, of course, starting with Ranma 1/2. So Ranma 1/2 is a manga series which was pretty long-run-ded and over 150 episodes of anime. So there's a lot of material out there if you want to look into it. You can watch a lot of the anime episodes, a couple of movies, or read through the entire manga series. It's about this boy Ranma and his father who are martial artists. They go to China to train and end up at these springs which you're supposed to train over. Turns out they are cursed springs, and it is actually not advised to train over them. They fall in. Each one a different spring. It turns out whatever drowned in one of those springs, when you fall into it, you can change into that. Ranma falls into one that a girl drowned in. His father falls into one that a panda drowned in. So now whenever they're exposed to cold water, they change into whatever drowned in that spring. Warm water changes them back. So Ranma now switches between a girl and a boy, and his father between a man and a panda. So they return to Japan to go to his father Genma's friend, So Tendo's dojo. Effectively, the Tendo Jojo, he only has daughters. So Son only has 3 daughters. And he wants his dojo to go on because Ranma's father, who studied the same martial arts, did not found a dojo like his effective training partner did. So Ranma's now betrothed to one of the 3 daughters, and he gets betrothed to the youngest, Akane. So the two of them then get engaged effectively, and then a majority of rivals, strange things happen, people that also fell into the drowned springs and have different changing abilities. A lot of funny things happen. So it's this hilarity of martial arts and strange things and comedy and a little bit of romance thrown in. I cannot describe more without starting to go into what happens in a lot of these episodes and introducing a lot more of the characters, which will spoil more things, but I highly recommend it. So let's talk about the genres. Of course, it's a martial artist. Ranma is a pretty great martial artist, and he gets into a lot of fights. He's actually pretty elite when it comes to top tier, and he gets a lot of different rivals and fights a bunch of different people and gets into really cool martial arts battles. It's a romantic comedy. There is this romantic tension that does begin to develop as the series goes on between Akane and Ranma, but each of them also seemingly has their own people that are going after them, that most of the time they don't want anything to do with. So it's this kind of thing is like, each of them has this sphere of people that kind of like them, and it causes all these kind of strange tensions. Romantic comedy. But I would also call it urban fantasy. Now, the reason I would call this, it is set in a more modern area, and they get cursed with the ability to change into that. But they also have the amazing martial arts powers, so they have like key abilities that they eventually develop, and attacks based around that. Now, I rate this one a 5. It was one of my favorite manga series. I read through the entire thing, and I didn't see quite as much of the anime, unfortunately. I watched as much as I could, but really the manga is the top tier where I was watching it, where I was getting this information from before anything else. But again, I would highly recommend. So let's talk about using Ranma 1/2 in your BESM game. I recommend 250 to 350 points, depending on sort of where you want to fit it in the storyline. Ranma gets more powerful, he really does, as he trains more throughout the series, so you would want to reflect that. What you're going to do is you're going to have your people, a group of characters that may or may not get along in the long run, but each of them has, in turn, been cursed at a different drowned spring. They're probably going to all have some form of martial arts that they have been practicing and gotten good at. Now, the entire thing is, like in the anime and the manga, there are usually some kind of larger plot line that occurs that a number of the characters have to unite to go against. Whether that kind of means that they're just frenemies, or they eventually try to betray each other or something like that. That's entirely up to the players, that they might, still work against each other while still working for this greater good, effectively, of a threat that's bigger than all of them. And you can just come up with interesting things, either some of them based around the anime itself and just having your characters in it, or just something else entirely. And you can have some sessions with just the characters interacting with each other in their normal lives, because most of them are students or have normal lives, work at different places, and the things that happen in between them can end up being very funny and entertaining too, especially if each of them is acting according to whatever they've built for their characters that makes them unique and interesting. Now let's move on and start talking about Flame of Recca. Now Flame of Recca was also a manga series which is finished up, and an anime series which was actually far shorter than the manga series would have recommended for it. It did not take up all of the manga. It was only 42 episodes. Now the story focuses on a young boy, Recca, who aspires to become a ninja. He wants to be like a ninja like in olden days, so it is set in modern times. And during his quest to become this, he runs into this girl, Yanagi, and actually helps her out and rescues her, and effectively decides to become her personal ninja, because apparently she's threatened very often. She turns out to have this ability to heal people, a mystical ability. And this ends up having a lot of problems. And along the way, where Recca and his friends, as they sort of get together to help out, Recca learns that he is in fact descended from the leader of a ninja clan which was thought wiped out hundreds of years ago by Oda Nobunaga. So he in fact has this ability to manifest this flame that is an ability in and of himself. So he has his own mystical ability he learns. And along the way they also learn that there are these number of objects called the Madogu, which are ninja objects that were, when this clan was destroyed, were effectively spread out. They are mystical ninja objects that a number of his friends pick up in order to become this team of ninjas that work together and protect Yanagi and stop a lot of these plots which are going on. Now the genres for this one I would call an action-adventure. They go on these massive quests that oftentimes they have to travel with. They have a lot of battle scenes, fighting out with people with their own Madogu, and they use their own oftentimes to battle it out. I would call it a fantasy. Some of them have mystical powers. They have mystical artifacts of ninja power. That's kind of fanciful. But it's also a little bit of a romantic comedy. Recca has this thing for Yanagi that he treats her like a princess, but he also really likes her, and there's very comical moments that not only revolve around that, but an entire thing too. And it's oftentimes, though, the most when he is doing something related to her, because he's kind of awkward teenager, it oftentimes adds the most amount of comedy. Now, I'd also rate this one a 5. It is another one of the top ones I enjoyed very much. I read through a good chunk of the manga, and I saw the entire anime. I still have to finish the manga. List of things to do. Now, I recommend starting out like 250, 300 points for your characters. You give them that they have some kind of inherited ninja power, or they have their own Motogu that they perhaps inherited from an ancestor, that now they are forming their own school-age ninja clan. And they are facing against other ninja threats that might be there to steal their Motogu or kidnap a member of them because of their ability or something like that. You could come up with your own sort of plot line. You could mimic something similar to what's going on in the anime, or come up with your own of some kind of threat that's causing them to fight against it and maybe go on some kind of quest along the way. You might also want to include some of their daily life sort of things to break up that action, to give a little bit of that maybe chances for romance and comedy to develop. Now let's move on to talking about the two series from summer 2015. We start with Ushio and Tora. Now this again was another manga series and has had 2 anime seasons. It focuses around Ushio, this young boy who finds imprisoned in his house Tora, this tiger-like monster that his ancestor sealed there with a cursed spear. Eventually, some kind of threat is coming to attack, and he is forced to release Tora, donning the cursed spear himself. Of course, Tora, at this point in time, wants revenge for what the ancestor did, but the two of them are sort of forced to work together because Ushio then becomes sort of embodiment of his ancestor, manipulating the spear and gaining its abilities, and the two of them battle against these supernatural threats. It's very episodic in both the anime and the manga, that there are like these monsters of the week that are the threat and that they have to deal with. The manga takes place over a number of chapters, is like an episode. Similarly, the anime does that over a number of episodes as an overall storyline, like smaller storylines broken apart, similar to some other more like detective shows would often have, except this is more supernatural, battling it out against monsters. And the two of them, though, do form a kind of bond, because Tora really is not the most horrible creature in the world. He tries to act that way, but he really is sort of a nice guy in the end. even though he is kind of a monster. And the two of them become these sort of frenemies because Tora still regrets being sealed away for generations, hundreds of years. You know, that's that anger that's hard for him to get away from. Now, this is an action anime when we're talking about their genres. They have massive battles against supernatural creatures where the Ushio and Tora are working together to fight it out. It, of course, is supernatural. You have a tiger monster called Tora and supernatural monsters of Japanese legend coming to fight them. It's also, though, a comedy. There's some very funny things that happen in the interactions between Tora and Ushio because not many people can see the giant tiger monster, so he does a lot of funny things there in the entire thing. Now I rate this one a 4. I enjoyed it quite well. Wasn't my favorite just because of little things about it, but I enjoyed it quite a lot. Now let's talk about using it in your BESM games. I recommend 400 points for your characters. They will take the roles of Ushio and Tora. Effectively, one or more characters will be the more human side of it that might have artifacts like a cursed spear. And at least 1 or 2 people will be the tiger monster, or will be a monster of supernatural origins. And the two groups will effectively be working together, having some kind of rivalry in their past that has caused them to not necessarily be the most friendly with each other, but things have forced them to work together in this situation that the human side wants to be caretaker to them to make sure they don't do anything bad, and they kind of just want to get out on their own, but they don't want to really be resealed too. So it's this kind of strange dynamic you build up, and then you do episodic more. They face a monster of the week, so to say, some kind of supernatural creature of legend that they will battle against. You can also then deal with the human side of the daily lives that they're kind of leading, and the monster side of trying to maybe not live up to their past and trying to evolve into something a little better, that maybe they were pretty horrible in the past to get them sealed, and maybe this is an opportunity for them to remake themselves as better creatures. Let's talk about Little Witch Academia. Now, I have to say for first, this was a number of movies and a manga, and it is an upcoming anime series. So before the anime series has even been out, I am recommending this as a great source for a BESM game. Think about that way, that I enjoyed it quite a lot. So that's why it's a little unusual, because I'm basing it directly on the movie and the manga rather than just the actual physical anime. It's an anime movie. So our story focuses around Ako, who's joining Lunar Nova Magical Academy, an academy for witches. Now she goes there because she had been inspired by Shiny Chariot, this flashy witch that had done this great service years ago, and so she wants to become a witch very much like that. But she finds that because she is not descended from magic, it is a lot harder for her to get into it and to learn a lot of these things. Now she is supported by her 2 friends, Lotz and Susie, that help her get through a lot of these hard times, even when some of her other classmates make fun of her for her original motivation for joining here and why she really wants to learn and what her goal is in learning magic. That these aren't really traditional witch ideas the way she thinks about things, so that kind of insult her. But in these adventures that happen in the various movies and the manga, she repeatedly proves herself worthy of being there, that she has some magical potential behind herself, and that maybe her goals aren't so bad, that more wanting, magic users and people to get along, and that the entire, flashiness of magic is not a problem and not something to be looked down upon. Now, for the genres, I would call it, of course, a fantasy. There's magic, mystical creatures, spell casting. It's a school one. It's based around an academy, so it's a lot of adventures based around a kind of school. Now, granted, it's a school away from home, but it is one and all. I would also call it a witch anime. Now, this was a hard one to kind of come up with a third genre for this one, and I thought about it, that there are a number of animes that don't just focus on the fantasy aspect, focus specifically on the traditional sort of witch idea of a character, usually more like the Western idea of a witch, the traditional broom and hat and sort of thing. And so I think that's a little bit, if it's a almost subgenre of fantasy or supernatural, that would be important to talk about in this case. Now, I rate this one a 5. It's kind of cute, kind of entertaining. It just kind of is a heartwarming kind of anime. That's a great way of describing it. It's heartwarming, and that's why it was very enjoyable to watch. Now, for using this in your BESM game, I recommend 250 points. Make them students at Lunar Nova. Make them a young group of witches that are going together, teaching. They're a bunch of friends, and they get into different various school events or festivals or things going on at the school that they might have to get involved in. Whatever their motivations for becoming a witch is entirely up to the player that they're building their character for, but they get motivated to it, and they're a group of friends that unfortunately just tend to get into trouble, whether it's on a regular basis, whether it's magical or not. So that's it for today. I talked about 4 series and talked about using them in your BESM games. I gave you some basic information about how to do them, points, recommendations, some other suggestions for using it in your BESM game. If you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, Anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. Show support for the channel, the Empire, the work I do. And until the next time, I bid you farewell.